Welcome to Voyage Daily Tech, the most important news personalized for you every day, supported by Voyage.com.
Today we're sharing 5 stories. First, why the US government led by Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick is now looking to take ownership stakes in chipmakers like Intel, TSMC, and Samsung. Then we'll break down China's stunning reversal on crypto, a new plan for a Yuan-Backed stablecoin out of Hong Kong to challenge the US dollar's dominance. After that, the incredible story of Sarah Ezekiel, whose voice was recreated by AI company 11 Labs from just 8 seconds of a damaged VHS tape from the 90s. We'll also cover how software titan Epic Systems is using its database of 300 million patients to build a proprietary AI called Cosmos AI with help from Microsoft. And finally, why Amazon is ditching its Fire OS for standard Android on tablets and how its new Project Kitty Hawk could cost nearly $400. The story begins with a decision that caught everyone by surprise. The United States government is exploring a plan to take a piece of some of the biggest tech companies on the planet. This isn't a new tax or a regulation. We're talking about the government wanting an ownership stake, actual equity in the corporations that build the computer chips powering our entire world. Semiconductors are the brains behind everything from your smartphone and car to advanced military defense systems and artificial intelligence. The country that controls the chip supply chain essentially holds a key to global technological and economic leadership. The plan first surfaced with a deal for the US to take a 10% stake in Intel, but the rabbit hole goes deeper. Now, US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick is looking to expand this strategy to a who's who of global chip manufacturing, Micron, Taiwan's TSMC, and South Korea's Samsung. This is where the situation takes a more complex turn. Taking a stake in a foreign company like TSMC or Samsung isn't just a business deal, it's a major geopolitical move. TSMC is a cornerstone of Taiwan's entire economy and national identity. For the US government to become a part owner, it would require intense negotiations with the Taiwanese government. The same goes for Samsung in South Korea. These actions could be seen as an encroachment on their national champions, potentially straining relations with key allies. This all stems from the massive $52.7 billion CHIPS Act, a fund designed to bring semiconductor manufacturing back to American soil. Billions have already been earmarked for these companies, $6.2 billion for Micron, $6.6 billion for TSMC, and $4.75 billion for Samsung. But now, that money could come with a major string attached, a government seat at the ownership table. The White House is calling it a creative idea that has never been done before, designed to put America's needs first, both from a national security and economic perspective. And if you think this is just about future deals, think again. The Commerce Secretary has already started renegotiating some previous grants, calling them overly generous. This signals a seismic shift in the relationship between Washington and Silicon Valley. Now, in the past, the US government has taken stakes in companies during moments of economic crisis. But this is different. When the government bailed out Chrysler in 1979, for instance, it was a reactive move to save a failing company and hundreds of thousands of jobs. This new strategy, however, is proactive. It's not about saving failing companies. It's about steering healthy, globally dominant ones to secure a strategic advantage for the nation. This move would create what the reporting calls a new era of US influence over healthy, dominant, and critically important global corporations. The central question is no longer just about subsidies. It's about control. So what happens when the government isn't just a regulator, but a shareholder? We're entering uncharted territory here. There's a huge potential for a conflict of interest. How can the Commerce Department be an impartial regulator for the industry when it's also a part owner of some of the key players? This could lead to the government picking winners and losers, which could stifle the very innovation it's trying to protect. On top of that, this ownership might not just be for profit. We could see the government use a mechanism called a golden share, which would grant it veto power over critical corporate decisions, things like blocking a merger, dictating who the company can sell chips to, or even preventing jobs from moving overseas. It's a powerful tool for national security, but it fundamentally changes the nature of these global companies. We were just talking about the US making a huge strategic play in the world of hardware. Well, believe it or not, another global power is making a similar move, but its battleground is digital currency. In a stunning reversal, the very country that famously banned cryptocurrency trading and mining is now reportedly planning to launch its own digital currency, a yuan-backed stablecoin, in a direct challenge to the supremacy of the US dollar. This is where the situation gets interesting. China is actually pursuing a sophisticated dual-track strategy. Their current digital yuan, the ECNY, is designed primarily for domestic retail use, basically as a replacement for cash, but it's not built for the heavy lifting of international business-to-business trade. This new plan for a yuan-backed stablecoin is the other track, a separate tool designed specifically for cross-border payments and to compete directly on the global stage. To understand the sheer scale of this ambition, you just have to look at the global payments landscape. Right now, the US dollar commands nearly 48% of all global payments. The Chinese yuan, a tiny 2.88%, a two-year low. But the real battleground is stablecoins, the digital tokens pegged to real-world currencies. In that world, the dollar isn't just winning, it's dominating, backing over 99% of the entire global supply. And make no mistake, this isn't just about finance, it's a geopolitical power play. For China and its allies, like those in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, a yuan-backed stablecoin could be a practical tool to bypass the US dollar and the SWIFT financial messaging system. It offers a way to conduct international trade outside of the traditional Western-controlled financial rails. According to sources, China's State Council is set to review a new roadmap for yuan internationalization, and stablecoins are seen as the key weapon. This isn't just talk. The plan is to use Hong Kong and Shanghai as the main hubs to fast-track the project. This move comes right as Hong Kong has put its own regulations for stablecoin issuers into effect, perfectly positioning the city as a launch pad for Beijing's ambitions. This whole plan solves a huge puzzle. You know, how can a country with famously strict capital controls launch a borderless digital currency? The answer lies in using Hong Kong as a controlled sandbox. The plan is to use what are called permissioned blockchains, which allow the government to set the rules. Think of it as creating an offshore yuan stablecoin that operates in a firewalled environment, allowing for international use while preventing uncontrolled capital from flooding out of mainland China. This isn't happening in a vacuum. It's a direct response to mounting geopolitical tensions and the growing influence of dollar-linked cryptocurrencies. In a sign of the pressure, even Chinese exporters are increasingly using dollar-backed stablecoins, a trend Beijing is desperate to reverse. The stakes are enormous. The global stablecoin market is already valued at over $240 billion, but some major banks estimate it could explode to $2 trillion within the next few years. And we're already seeing major players get in line. Chinese tech giants like Ant Group and JD.com are reportedly lobbying to get licenses to issue these new stablecoins as soon as the framework is ready. This move marks a new front in the global financial power struggle. The question is no longer if a digital currency war is coming, but when it starts. With this plan, Beijing is signaling it intends to fire the first major shot. From a high-stakes financial power play, our next story shifts to something incredibly personal, showing how AI technology is changing lives in ways we could have never imagined. A seemingly impossible feat became a reality this week. It took just 8 seconds of scratchy audio from an old VHS tape to give a mother her voice back after 25 years of silence. Sarah Ezekiel was diagnosed with motor neurone disease, or MND, shortly after her second child was born. Within months, she lost her ability to speak. For a quarter of a century, her children, Aviva and Eric, only ever heard her communicate through a cold, emotionless robotic voice. They had no memory of what their own mother actually sounded like. Then, a tech company called Smartbox asked for an hour of audio to try and recreate her voice with AI. The family searched, but Sarah lost her voice in 2000, before smartphones captured every moment. All they could find was an old family camcorder tape from the 90s. The audio was terrible, muffled, and drowned out by a blaring TV. Buried in the noise were just 8 seconds of Sarah's voice. This miracle, however, also highlights a growing issue we're calling the vocal data divide. It was only possible because that one single clip was found, but what happens to individuals who have no surviving audio recordings of their voice? We're heading toward a future where this kind of identity restoration might only be available to those with a pre-existing data footprint, leaving others behind. The specialist at Smartbox, Simon Poole, admitted his heart sank. He said, "I thought there's no way we're going to be able to create a voice using audio that bad." But then the impossible happened. Using breakthrough technology from the AI voice company 11 Labs, they isolated those 8 seconds. They ran it through AI, trained on thousands of voices to predict intonation and fill in the gaps. They didn't just clean up the audio, they resurrected a voice. Now, get this, the breakthrough came from what some in the industry call an AI cocktail method. This isn't just one AI doing all the work. It's a multi-stage process. First, one specialized AI, like a digital detective, isolates the voice and scrubs away all that background noise. Then, a second, more creative, AI takes over. It uses its training from thousands of other voices to reconstruct the missing audio, predict the natural rhythm and pitch, and essentially rebuild the voice from that tiny 8-second blueprint. It's a collaboration between different AI models, each with its own unique skill. The result? Her children, now adults, heard their mother's true voice for the very first time. Her daughter, Aviva, says, "It was amazing. We can feel who she is as a person. Mum isn't just a disabled person in the corner with a robot that doesn't relate to her." And that feeling, that sense of who she is the real breakthrough here. So how does an AI learn to replicate emotion from just a few seconds of sound? Well, the secret lies in the training. These models are fed vast libraries of human speech, allowing them to learn the subtle patterns of what we call prosody. That's the tone, the cadence, and the stress that colors our words with feeling. The AI analyzes the unique emotional signature in Sarah's voice and then applies those patterns to new words. It's not just mimicking sound, it's recreating the musicality of her speech, which is why it feels so authentic and not like a machine. For Sarah, who now speaks using eye gaze technology, hearing her own voice again was what she calls a kind of miracle. After decades of being a robot, she says, "I'm glad to be back." And while this is a deeply personal victory for Sarah and her family, it's also a glimpse into a rapidly growing industry. The global voice cloning market is projected to be worth over $16 billion by 2032. Companies are offering services like this, sometimes for free, to patients to build a user base and pioneer new technologies. But this raises huge questions for all of us. Who owns a digital voice? How do we secure it? We are at the very beginning of figuring out the rules for protecting our vocal identity in an age where it can be perfectly recreated. That story is a beautiful example of AI being used for good, but it raises a bigger question. What happens when this kind of powerful AI is applied not just to one person, but to the private health data of an entire nation? Let's start with a single statistic that might just change your entire perspective on healthcare data. A private company has quietly built a de-identified database on 300 million patients. And now they're using it to build a new form of artificial intelligence, feeding it 8 billion medical encounters to get started. Now, about that term, de-identified data, what most people don't realize is that the promise of anonymity is becoming an illusion. Modern technology makes it frighteningly easy to re-identify people. One study found that 99.98% of individuals in a de-identified US dataset could be correctly re-identified using just 15 demographic details. This matters because the very foundation of this massive AI project rests on a concept of privacy that may no longer be secure. The company is Epic Systems, the health software titan whose platform is already used by 280 million Americans. At a recent event, they unveiled their bombshell, a proprietary foundation model called Cosmos AI. Its goal isn't just to organize data, but to predict a patient's medical future, forecasting everything from their risk of a hospital readmission to a potential heart attack. This is a critical moment because when an AI is trained on real-world data, it doesn't just learn medicine, it also learns our society's hidden biases. Research has repeatedly shown that AI models trained on health records can inherit and even amplify existing disparities in care. If there's stigmatizing language in a patient's notes, or if a certain demographic has historically received less attention, the AI can learn those patterns and make predictions that reinforce the problem, potentially leading to worse outcomes for already vulnerable groups. And if you think that scale is the whole story, an executive dropped this line, having only used 8 billion encounters so far, we're just getting started. But the AI offensive doesn't stop there. Epic is also launching an army of AI assistants. For patients, an always-on assistant named Emmy will answer questions about lab results and suggest appointments. For doctors, an AI colleague named Art will anticipate what information they need and draft clinical notes in real time, a feature that could change the daily life of every clinician. This could fundamentally alter the doctor-patient relationship. After all, studies show patients often can't tell the difference between a doctor's response and an AI's. In some cases, they actually rated the AI's answers as more trustworthy, even when the information was wrong. This creates a huge risk of over-reliance on these tools, where the human intuition and personal connection that are so vital to medicine could start to fade away. This move is a direct shot across the bow of the booming AI scribe market, where startups like Abridge and Ambience Healthcare have raised hundreds of millions to solve doctor burnout. Epic is essentially building its own competitor, potentially cornering the market it already dominates. The reason this is so significant is that by making its AI models proprietary and training them on its exclusive Cosmos dataset, Epic is building what experts call a data moat. This creates an almost insurmountable advantage, effectively building a walled garden around its technology. This could stifle innovation from smaller startups and potentially lock hospitals that don't use Epic into a lower tier of AI-driven care, widening the technology gap in medicine. However, if you zoom out, you'll see another layer of strategy at play. They're not doing it alone. Epic announced a collaboration with Microsoft to build this AI charting tool. Yes, the same Microsoft whose DAX Copilot product is already a major player in the AI scribe space. It's a classic case of rivals getting in bed together, a high-stakes game of collaboration and competition. It all leads to one massive question. What happens when the company that holds the health records for most of America also controls a predictive AI brain trained on that unprecedented trove of data? The future of healthcare is being written, and Epic just revealed a stunning new chapter. Speaking of building moats and walled gardens, our final story today is about a tech giant that's planning to do the exact opposite by tearing its own walls down. After more than a decade, Amazon is reportedly planning a massive change for its Fire tablets, moving away from its custom Fire OS and embracing standard Android for the first time. This is a huge philosophical shift for the retail giant, which has famously insisted on its own software since the first Fire tablet launched in 2011. What really brought this to a head was the simple fact that its walled garden strategy is starting to crumble. Consumers today expect more flexibility. They want their devices to work seamlessly with all sorts of services, not just one company's. This shift suggests Amazon sees the writing on the wall. Closed ecosystems are becoming less and less appealing in a market that increasingly values choice and openness. The move comes after years of escalating complaints from both consumers and app developers who have been frustrated by the limited app store and the lack of access to the latest Android features. As one industry researcher put it, the old system simply meant more work for developers. And that work for developers wasn't a small thing. It wasn't just about listing an app in a different store. Fire OS lacked Google's core services, which means basic functions like notifications, location, and in-app payments don't work out of the box. Developers had to recode their apps using Amazon's specific tools, a major headache that many just decided to skip. But that's not the whole picture. The real catch is that Amazon is moving to the open source version of Android, which means it still won't have Google's blessing. There will be no Google Play Store, no Gmail, no YouTube, no Google Maps pre-installed. We've seen this movie before with Huawei, which struggled mightily outside of China to build a compelling ecosystem without Google's core apps. This is the massive gamble Amazon is taking. The first new Android tablet, part of a project codenamed Kitty Hawk, is slated to be a higher-end device. And the price? Sources say Amazon has discussed a $400 price tag. That is nearly double the cost of its current top-tier tablet. This presents a fascinating duality. On one side, Amazon is finally giving users the open software they've asked for, while on the other, it's abandoning its classic strategy of selling hardware at or near its manufacturing cost just to get you into its ecosystem of books and videos. The company is no longer content with being the fourth largest tablet seller, holding just 8% of the market. This is a direct shot at market leaders Apple and Samsung, who together control over half the entire market. The stakes are incredibly high. Amazon has tried and failed at this before. The infamous Fire Phone, which also relied on the limited Fire OS, was a massive failure that led to a $170 million write-down. The The reason that phone failed was precisely this app gap problem. It just didn't have the applications users wanted and expected. The project's internal code name, Kitty Hawk, is a curious choice. It evokes the sight of the Wright brothers' first successful flight, but it's also the name of a high-profile flying car startup that failed spectacularly. The real question is, which one will this be for Amazon?
That's it for today on Voyage Daily Tech. Follow, share, and stay tuned for daily updates coming your way tomorrow.